Major funding for the series, Louisiana, A History, was provided by the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting and the State of Louisiana. Corporate funding was provided by Bank One, proud to celebrate Louisiana's diverse past and committed to investing in our state's future. Community Coffee, part of Louisiana's rich history. Since 1919, devoted to providing signature coffees to our communities. Additional funding was provided by the following history patrons, helping all citizens discover the extraordinary legacy of Louisiana and its people.
Le fleuve fut enseveli par un brouillard jusqu'à 9 heures. The river was shrouded by fog until 9 o'clock. The winds are calm.
They were sent to an alien world on a mission of strategic importance.
Britain claimed it, Spain claimed it. The Indians were really quite powerful.
To build a colony in an unforgiving land.
There is such great supply of alligators that one sees them at every moment. The snakes are much more dangerous.
At times abandoned by their king.
No ship has arrived since August. There was therefore an absolute need for food and supplies supposedly being sent from France.
They somehow overcame the obstacles man and nature threw up against them. But in the end, the struggling colony would never rise above the status of a pawn in the power games of kings and emperors.
I renounce Louisiana. It is not only New Orleans that I will cede, it is the whole colony without any reservation.
It was the biggest quick cash sale of all times, the greatest land deal in history.
Well, it added almost half of the territory of the United States to the new nation at a bargain price. It brought New Orleans into the Union and made it the greatest port for everybody from the Appalachians that had ended up way over to the Rockies. So how important was it? It's impossible to exaggerate its importance.
No longer a pawn, Louisiana moved the young United States to the center of the world stage and fired the imagination of the new nation it was now a part of.
Every eye in the United States is now fixed on this affair of Louisiana. Perhaps nothing since the Revolutionary War has produced more uneasy sensations through the body of the nation.
Our story begins with the arrival of two intrepid brothers in the unbounded wilderness of the Mississippi Valley, a territory that stretched from the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico. In a little more than a century, that wilderness would come to bloom, first as a European colony full of promise, then as the frontier of a fledgling American nation. This is a story of great discovery, hard-fought conflict, monumental triumphs, and maddening setbacks. It's a tale of fire and flood, pestilence and piety, greed and grandeur. Above all, it's the story of a people, families struggling to make a life for themselves and their children in a harsh yet bountiful land called Louisiana.
My brother Bienville, with 2 canoes, always sails along one of the river's banks and keeps watch. At midday, we discovered a campfire on the left bank, and we know an Indian had been there. Pierre Lemoine, Sieur d'Iberville.
Indeed, Indians had been in Louisiana a long time. Along Bayou Macon near Monroe are the vast earthworks called Poverty Point, among the largest in North America. It stands as a mysterious testimony to the great Indian civilization that once flourished here, 18 centuries before the birth of Christ. The region was home to many vibrant cultures.
Life before the arrival of European explorers was dynamic, and this is something people don't expect to find because we view American Indians before European contact as living in a very static world. We tend to deny it the kind of vitality and diversity that we recognize in other parts of the world at that very same time.
The first European to encounter these people was Hernando de Soto of Spain. He greeted them with a sword. Village after village, de Soto's conquistadors swept through the Indian lands, taking with them what treasures they could carry. Even worse, however, was what they left behind.
Many scholars believe that the collapse of the chiefdoms over the 16th and 17th centuries was due to the effects of disease. People living in those large communities were more vulnerable to smallpox, might have suffered a decline at a rate of 90% within a matter of years.
Nearly a century and a half would pass before the next European set foot in Louisiana territories. When the French explorer La Salle arrived, he found the Indian populations decimated, their villages abandoned. But unlike De Soto, the French did not come to make war against the Indians. They came to do business with them.
Moi, René Robert Cavelier de La Salle, conformément à l'ordre de mission de Sa Majesté, qui est en ma
La Salle claimed for France all the lands drained by the Mississippi.
Possession du territoire de la Louisiane.
By establishing friendly relations with the natives living there, La Salle blazed a trail for the French colonist who would soon follow him.
When the French came to the coast in 1699, the way was pretty well set for them. They were able to make good alliances fairly quickly because the promises that La Salle had made about trade and everything else, people were waiting for someone to deliver on those.
Someone like Iberville and his brother Bienville.
After an exchange of civilities, we went to my brother's tent, where we all smoked my iron peace pipe, made in the form of a ship with a white flag marked with a fleur-de-lis. I then gave them a present consisting of hatchets, shirts, beads, and other things valued by them, and made them understand that with this calumet I had rendered them united with the French, and that we were now one nation. Pierre Lemoine, Sieur d'Iberville.
It's very clear that one of the pieces of genius that Iberville brought with him from his experience in Canada was to realize that the way to relate with Native Americans was to accord them a level of dignity. And so basically at the beginning, Native groups provided them with food, shelter, clothing even. They basically took them in many cases as guests.
Iberville and his men would need all the friends they could get. Louisiana was an exotic but unforgiving wilderness. Never before had these Europeans seen such an alien world.
There is such great supply of alligators that one sees them at every moment. We have killed several at the foot of the fort. They don't come back so frequently anymore. The snakes are much more dangerous. Monsieur de Sauveur, commandant de Biloxi.
Food was scarce, hurricanes were not, and malaria hung over their camps and clouds of mosquitoes. Settlers seemed to be dying as quickly as they arrived. Of the original 50, 13 were lost in the first year alone.
I've often said to my classes, for the early French coming to Louisiana would be comparable to me saying to my wife today, come on, honey, pack up, we're going to the Amazon jungle to live the rest of our lives. We're not prepared to do that. They were not prepared to encounter Louisiana. They had no idea of such things as climate, insects, diseases that were to be found here.
Again and again, Iberville returned to France to plead for more supplies and more men. In 1702, he bade farewell to his younger brother Bienville and left the colony on his 4th trip back to Europe.
I left a total of 70 men and 6 cabin boys and all of the supplies aboard the freighters. We have gotten under sail and tacked, about to depart. The winds are southeasterly. Pierre Lemoine, Sieur d'Iberville.
Bienville never saw his brother again. Called away to war unexpectedly, Pierre Lemoine, Sieur d'Iberville, founder of Louisiana, died 4 years later. A young man in his early 20s, Bienville was left to govern the better part of a continent.
What is needed to make this colony prosperous is proper men to govern it. Whatever may be said of Monsieur de Bienville, I believe he is more fitted than any other. He is a good soldier and commander-in-war, and he knows perfectly the languages of the country and how to deal with the savages. Sieur Béranger, navigateur.
The troubles confronting the young leader and his colony were staggering.
Potential settlers coming out to Louisiana came to see the colony as a dying place. And the colony got that reputation in France. Now, that was the lower colony. That was the area below Natchez. That was the swamp area where so many insects were, so many diseases, so many reptiles. Having to start life anew in a situation like that, they found unbearable. And so many did take any and every opportunity to return to France. Unfortunately, many just died in Louisiana.
The colonists quickly realized that they couldn't count on help from the mother country. France's power was declining, and she was too distracted by ongoing warfare to pay much attention to Louisiana. Bienville and his men were on their own.
The first half of the month of March slipped away quickly, during which time no ship arrived from France. For that matter, no ship has arrived since August. There was therefore an absolute need for food and supplies supposedly being sent from France. We were forced to give the troops the seed wheat. It was not fit to be used by humans, for it was of bad quality and full of weevils. Charles Le Gac, Directeur Général, Ship Island.
There was constant quarreling among the colonists, often with Bienville caught in the middle. To make matters worse, Louisiana was surrounded by old enemies.
There was rivalry over control of Louisiana. Britain claimed it, Spain claimed it. The Indians were really quite powerful, and they had many good warriors. and the British used their Indian allies against the French, and the French used their Indian allies against the British. It was not at all a secure place.
Well, the fact is, Louisiana was, in its first 2 decades, a strategic colony more than anything else for the French. Getting access to the Mississippi River, controlling it, preventing the English from occupying it, establishing a base on the Gulf Coast. All of those objectives were what we might call strategic in France's struggle with the English and the Spanish.
Clashes were inevitable.
In descending the river to within 23 leagues of its mouth, Monsieur de Bienville has met an English frigate of 12 cannons, to which he has made opposition. Monsieur de Sauvole, commandant de Biloxi.
Facing the English warship from his small boat, the bold young man did the only thing he could. He bluffed. Bienville convinced the British captain that he was leading the advance party for a fleet of French ships. It worked. The English frigate quickly turned and left. Today, this bend in the river is still called English Turn. While the English menaced Louisiana from the east, the Spanish were encroaching from the west. The colony needed an envoy to deal with this threat, someone shrewd enough to turn the enemies into customers.
I think Saint-Denis was an opportunist and an adventurer, someone who saw an opportunity to establish a small trading empire in an area of the colony in which close supervision was not possible.
Louis Juchereau de Saint-Denis traveled up the Red River Valley with 22 soldiers and 10,000 pounds of trade goods. Saint-Denis' official mission was to deter the threat from Spanish forces entrenched in Mexico. Of course, if he could manage to do a little business with them, under the table, so much the better.
He exerted tremendous influence along the frontier and was sort of a one-man army in maintaining the French presence on the western frontier.
By 1714, Saint-Denis had established the first permanent European settlement in what is now the state of Louisiana. He named it after the Indians who had welcomed him there. And Natchitoches soon became a crucial outpost for defense and trade.
Louisiana's history is not just about the Mississippi River. There's that whole western side. And that's why the character of Saint-Denis becomes so fascinating, is that he was able somehow to hear these Indian groups, to become allied with them, to include them as trading partners. He was the only one.
Saint-Denis had